Well, I've looked forward to doing this segment. Mike Lee has been with us, making history in the Senate since the elections of 2010. Congressman John Ratcliffe of Texas has been with us, making news since just one election back from this one in 2014. And it is a pleasure to welcome both of them to the program. Oh, my gosh, let's see here. Rhonda, I have no idea what I just did. So that just totally obliterated. I really... Well, no idea. So grab them both back. I hit the button, and strange things happen. I can tell you what they're going to do. It is new legislation to be introduced by Representative Ratcliffe in the House and Senator Lee in the Senate. And let's give this another try. Okay, guys, that's not. Well, hang on a minute. All right, hang on. All right. So, okay, let's try this. Okay. I think that's Senator Lee. How you doing, sir?
Doing great. Thank you very much.
Well, thank goodness. Well, technology, not my forte, whichever one's right. There we go. And Congressman Ratcliffe, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, Mark.
Listen, it's nothing personal, I promise you. Exactly. Well, welcome to the way Washington often works. People hitting wrong buttons and things not going the way they should. Let me do just a minute from both of you on the incredibly important news of the morning. Then we're going to dive into something you guys are doing that is going to reverse a Supreme Court decision enabling federal agencies to usurp powers intended for Congress. Senator Lee, let me start with you. Brussels on fire and smoldering this morning. Another reminder of what we are up against. What thoughts are in your head this morning?
Well, this is tragic. My thoughts and prayers are with the victims, and my thoughts and prayers are with the American people right now who are scared to death of something like this happening once again on our soil. We've got to make sure that doesn't happen. And this is just a tragedy. There's no doubt about it.
Congressman Ratcliffe, I don't instantly want to take every headline as an opportunity to say, hey, this could happen to us. But quite frankly, this could happen to us.
It absolutely can. And, part of the problem there, Mark, is that, we've been treating the symptoms, not the disease. And I say that this is the president has placed us at risk on this issue, beyond the issue of border security, having to fight the president on his desire to expand refugees from Syria and other places, having to fight him on gaps in our visa waiver program, having to fight him on interior enforcement of our immigration laws. And in this environment, I think it's just crazy that we should be fighting our own administration when we can see this rising threat of radical Islamic terrorism across the world.
Tell me about it. Much more on this as we continue the show, but we've had this scheduled for a bit, and let me tell you the special occasion on which we welcome Senator Lee of Utah and Congressman Ratcliffe of Texas. We've talked about this a lot on the show, that there are unelected and thus unaccountable bureaucrats and agencies making all kinds of decisions that should be available to us to express our will. And how does that happen? Well, it happens through the people we elect to Congress, to the House and the Senate. Mike Lee, tell me about there's a Supreme Court decision mid-'80s, I hear, that made it easier for federal agencies to usurp powers intended for Congress. Tell me about that.
That's right. The name of the case is Chevron versus Natural Resources Defense Council. And in that case, the Supreme Court held that courts reviewing an agency action, an agency's interpretation of a statute that it's charged with implementing, is entitled to deference. In other words, Congress creates a law, outsourcing the making of new law. Let's say we pass a law that says, for instance, we shall have clean air, and the EPA gets to decide what clean air is, what pollution is, and what happens to polluters. EPA is then entitled to deference, meaning it's really, really difficult for anyone to undo what a federal regulatory agency does. That's exactly the problem that we're trying to address through the Separation of Powers Restoration Act. Congressman Ratcliffe and I have joined together to present this bill to Congress and to make clear that the American people need to make laws rather than having those laws made for them by unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats.
If there's anything I love, it's the names affixed to things. Usually they're snappy acronyms, but this one is just great words. The Separation of Powers Restoration Act. Congressman Ratcliffe, how has that concept been fouled? Just in your one term of service so far, I'm guessing that became apparent to you right inside the door.
Yeah. So, Mark, as you know, I came to Congress 15 months ago as part of a historic majority in the House. And because Republicans had also taken control of the Senate, my constituents and we were all optimistic that a Republican-controlled Congress would change things, that we finally pull back the reins on a runaway administrative state in this country. But, admittedly, in the last 15 months, very little has changed. And while it's fair to place blame on President Obama for so many blatant examples of executive overreach, I think candor and honesty should compel all members of Congress to admit that legislative underreach is very much to blame here. And this is where Senator Lee really deserves credit. He started a project that we call the Article 1 Project. It's a bicameral group of congressmen and senators that are focused on issues like this, restoring Article 1 powers, limiting an ever-expanding executive branch. And so legislation like this is and will continue to be the focus of our work here.
Well, it's a great idea. That's stipulated. Where does it go now becomes the practical question. Let's get the Senate angle of this from Senator Lee. I've become more of a Mitch McConnell fan in the last couple of weeks than maybe ever in terms of his holding a line on a Supreme Court replacement for Scalia until we have a new president. Will McConnell show that kind of spine on allowing this to see the light of day in the Senate?
Well, I certainly hope so. This is a problem that has been many decades in the making. It's not a problem that's likely to be solved instantaneously. Nevertheless, this is something that's worth pursuing. This is something that I'm going to keep pushing until it's passed.
While I've got you, how are we doing on that? Maintaining the firm line. I see a couple of people from Jeff Flake, Susan Collins, some senators saying, hey, I'm going to meet with President Obama's nominee. You can meet with him all day, but do you think there's going to be a crack in the ranks about hearings?
So far, Republican members, by and large, are holding strong. And I'm a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. There are 11 Republicans on that committee, 9 Democrats. All 11 Republicans have said, we're not going to move forward. We're not going to give a single inch. This is a lifetime appointment to the highest court in the land. And we want the American people to weigh in, to be able to choose the next president, who will in turn choose the next Supreme Court justice. If we were to fill this seat right now, the first time that the new justice would sit hearing cases would be in October, when the court resumes its work in the fall. Incidentally, that would be just weeks before the November presidential election. We think the American people would understandably be upset with that. We're not going to do it.
There is no argument for not waiting. Listen, if it was a year ago, we'd all shrug and go, oh, my God, I know Obama's still president. He gets this call. But it's not. We have an election on the near horizon. Let me get the House angle. Have we run this by Paul Ryan? Is he friendly to the Separation of Powers Restoration Act?
Yeah, Mark, he is. And, beyond Paul Ryan, Mark, really, this should not be a partisan issue. Republicans and Democrats should understand that members of Congress make law. Democrat and Republican lawmakers in the House and Senate should be equally offended that the executive branch keeps doing an end run around Congress.
Well, this is kind of interesting. Might you pick up some real Democrat support for this if we get a Republican successor to Obama? Isn't this seen through the lenses? I mean, Democrats are loving the rulemaking right now because they're guys making the rules.
Well, Senator Lee and I are going to work very hard to build bipartisan support for this because, I do think that this is Congress standing up to an overreaching executive branch, and so that'll be the focus. But I'm very optimistic, Mark. I really am.
Congressman
especially if we get the right president.
And with that, let's move to our final couple of minutes. Gee, funny you should mention that. Congressman John Ratcliffe, 4th District of Texas, and the great Mike Lee, senator from Utah. You guys were there early and often for Ted Cruz. Mike, you've been a fan of his, a friend of his for a long time, and are now an endorser. Congressman Ratcliffe, you were one of the first members of Congress to endorse Ted Cruz. How's that working out? Doesn't he absolutely have to pretty well start winning, if starting with Arizona and Utah tonight?
Yes, absolutely. And he's going to win Utah. He's going to win overwhelmingly. And I predict that he'll win enough of the vote, more than 50%, such that he'll take all of Utah's delegates. In Arizona, it's going to be a tough fight. We'll see what happens there. But look, the momentum is moving in Ted Cruz's direction. He's the only Republican in this race who can beat both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. He's a proven conservative, and I want him to win.
Congressman Ratcliffe, are you smelling skullduggery at the convention, an attempt to keep Trump under 1237, which the Cruz fans think are fine, but then the good news for the Cruz fans is Trump wouldn't have it locked up. The bad news for the Cruz fans is once you get it into that rules battle, you have a bunch of people who don't like Cruz or Trump, and all kinds of mischief may follow.
Yeah, I think that gets into the distinction of a contested convention is something that we very likely may see here. I don't know that anyone's going to get to 1237, but a brokered convention where party elites are picking someone, maybe someone that hasn't even been involved in this process after, Lord knows how many debates. That would be a real problem for the Republican Party. So I hope we don't get to that point. I think people just need to focus on, mathematically, on the Republican side, this is a two-person contest now. If everyone stopped campaigning and gave Governor Kasich every remaining delegate, he still wouldn't get to 1237.
Yep.
So it really is just it's down to two people on the Republican side, and one, you cannot question the authenticity of his conservative degree. The other one you can, and I think that as we move forward in this process, that's going to bear out, and that Ted's going to continue to pick up states and pick up delegates, and then we'll see what happens at the convention. I'm looking forward to being in Cleveland.
As he moves forward through the primaries, and if he does become the nominee, he'll certainly hear this in the general. So to answer this sentence I'm going to say, I want to go to his longtime friend, Mike Lee, and colleague in the Senate. Mike, you'll hear this about Ted all the time. Yeah, nobody likes him. He's too combative. He's too severe. We need people who reach out and across the aisle. He's just too harsh.
Well, look, what's harsh is a $19 trillion debt. What's harsh is a government that makes people work months out of every year just to pay their federal taxes. What's harsh is a federal government that imposes $2 trillion in regulatory compliance costs on the American economy, an expense that is borne disproportionately by America's poor and middle class. Ted Cruz is working hard for the average American, the hardworking, poor and middle-class American who is dejected, who has been disenfranchised, who has been disillusioned by a government that knows no boundaries, no limits. So, sure, he may ruffle some feathers in Washington because he wants to return power to the people. But Ted Cruz is a friend of the American people. He does have friends in Congress. And those who dislike him most, conveniently, are those who like the existing power structure in Washington the most, which the American people are overwhelmingly and justifiably rejecting.
Let the record show that was not a setup question from me to Mike Lee, enabling him to do a scripted response. He's just that good. He's just that good. It is great to have you, Senator Lee. Always great to welcome you, Congressman Ratcliffe. Thank you, guys. Best of luck. What do you want people to do, Congressman, Senator? Just say, hey, get with you no matter where they're calling from, listening from, what state, what district. Just have everybody get on board for the Separation of Powers Restoration Act. Is that the shorthand?
That's it.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, we're ready. Guys, a pleasure to have both of you. Thank you so much for your service, and it's great to have you on the program.
Thanks,
you very
Mark.
much. Appreciate it.
Look at that. How you like that? Congressman John Ratcliffe out of the 4th District of Texas, and Senator Mike Lee of Utah, whose state votes tonight, along with